my overall impression was Ashleigh Merchant is, number one, very clearly a truth teller. And one of the biggest things I learned was a lot of people thought, like, how did she get onto this? Did Nathan Wade's ex-wife call her and let her know about? No, it was Terrence Bradley who first turned her on to this whole story. The same guy with all the memory problems the other day. He's patient zero in this whole matter.
Yeah, great to be with you again. This is really, like drinking from a fire hose, trying to consume all of this information and digest it. But fortunately, a lot of what we heard today was not entirely unexpected. Like I, for example, had a pretty good idea that they were going to get into much more than the text messages. The text messages are just sort of a snippet of all of this. We know that there's conversations that Ashleigh has had with Terrence Bradley, and she talked about some of those today. In fact, she let us know that this whole thing with him began when they happened to be in the same courtroom at the same time with cases on the same calendar, and they're just chit-chatting the way we do when we're all in court. And apparently she started just taking notes, and asking follow-up questions, and the conversation began sort of ongoing with Terrence over some period of time, but she really did, I think, a very good job of being responsive. We saw what a witness looks like, who actually answers questions and who doesn't prevaricate, and who actually says, look, this is the response to your question, and I've got a little bit more to explain. So she was, I think, very, very thorough, obviously very well prepared. She knows this information like the back of her hand, and the Senate committee today did a lot more, I think, in terms of advancing the public discussion and the information that we all have about this than we've gotten in a lot of these court hearings. So really, we had a really good hearing today, and I think there may be additional information yet to come, but it was quite illuminating, to say the least.
We're going to play some sound bites, but what are they trying to do, Phil? What is the goal of this committee? What power do they have to affect what change?
Well, the committee let us know today that, they were watching the news just like the rest of us, and they see what's going on. And that was really what inspired them to set up this committee within the Georgia Senate. And of course, the Senate, they can't remove Fani Willis. They can't sanction her. But what they can do is they can start the lawmaking process. They can rein in rogue prosecutors. The legislature can enact laws that tighten the rules about conflicts of interest. They can make it a crime, for example, if they wanted to use nepotism in terms of hiring your contractors. If you're a department head, so to speak, like a constitutional officer, such as a district attorney or maybe a sheriff, they can do things that pertain to the ethics, the legal ethics that bind prosecutors. There's a lot that they can do, and they're going to figure out just what happened here in terms of prosecutorial misconduct, if there was any that they believe, that they can use their power as half of the legislature to effect change next time around. They're not going to be able to do anything this legislative session. It's too late. But you can mark my words, there will be change coming from the Georgia legislature next year.
It's wonderful to hear an attorney on the case be able to sit down and just answer all the questions about what she did, why she did it, who she was speaking to, how she got stonewalled from the prosecutors right in the middle of the whole proceedings. That was part of the fun of just watching Ashleigh Merchant have a heart-to-heart with these guys. You mentioned how she kind of just described getting to know Terrence Bradley. I believe she said that she met him sort of in a side room off of a courtroom one day when they were all there taking somebody's plea. Somebody had a client who was copping to a plea, and they started chatting, and he was no longer Nathan Wade's partner and maybe no longer his friend. That partnership ended in, she thought, August of 2023. And I wondered whether that was the year. I thought it was earlier than that. But in any event, she described how they started chit-chatting, and he was a fountain of information. Gone was the laconic man we saw on the stand last week who couldn't put two words together because he didn't remember them. And present, according to her, was this man who was just telling her in narrative form everything about this affair, how it began in 2019 or right around there, and was hot and heavy straight through. Here's just a little bit of her talking about that in SOT 23.
Mr. Bradley essentially went through the whole thing. He said that they met at a judicial conference before. He was very specific that it was before she became DA, because that was one of the things that he couldn't remember when the judicial conference was, but he knew that it was before she became DA, and said that they had been together. They met at this conference. Nathan was still married, and Mr. Bradley was upset because of what happened in the divorce. He was upset because they were still married, the Wades were still married, and he essentially just left her after meeting Miss Willis and dropping the kids off at college. I remember specifically him saying, I handle my business, things like that, that I don't leave my wife without alimony. And so he was telling me about the access cards, that Mr. Wade had access cards, telling me about the contracts, told me about their contract, that they had that Nathan had brought them the contract for the first appearance hearings, and ultimately that Nathan was hired as the attorney on this case. That they had been dating before, and he told me, they met at hotels. He would go to her place, and I remember him saying, you need to find her bestie who they had a falling out. That's the person whose condo it was.
It was fascinating, Phil. We heard a lot of that, saw a lot of that in the text messages that were released, right, that we have now in full. But to hear her say, he volunteered all of this to her, and not just to her, but now we know to two others who are willing to file affidavits and give testimony if the judge will reopen the hearing, that he told them two other lawyers, a DA and a private lawyer who had a defendant in this case who I think ultimately got dropped.
Yeah, so it's important to remember, Ashleigh Merchant and Terrence Bradley, they've been friends and colleagues for, years, probably even decades, as long as I've been in this area, over 20 years. So this is like just two friends having a casual conversation while they're waiting on their case to get called in court. And so what you see here is a description of Mr. Bradley just having a casual, friendly conversation. She's, of course, taking notes, and then she goes about the business of corroborating it. You heard her go into great detail saying how she just didn't take his word for it. She didn't disbelieve him, but she did her homework. She looked to verify, when did the city of South Fulton, Georgia, where Willis was the part-time judge, when did that city actually send her to this conference? And so she did her homework to confirm these things. But look, it wasn't just Ashleigh Merchant that was hearing all this. It was the chief assistant district attorney in Cobb County, Georgia, where my office is, Cindy Yeager, who has this week had her testimony proffered, where she says, no, I watched this hearing in court. I saw the testimony, and I have a different story. This was told to me differently, and I need to set the record straight. And now we also have Manny Aurora, who represented before there was a plea, another co-defendant in the case, who also had conversations. And so what we're starting to see, the dam is breaking, Megyn, and we have person after person after person coming forward to say there is a fraud being perpetrated on the court. Fani Willis is not telling the truth. We now have a filing as of yesterday. I think Donald Trump's legal team has literally said that Fani Willis and her team is perpetrating a fraud on the court. That is a separate basis, that independent of any other conflict of interest. That's a separate basis, and I agree, for her to be disqualified from the case. If we don't have prosecutors playing by the rules, playing fairly, doing what justice and the law requires, then our system does not work. It's as important as the right to be presumed innocent, and it's the right, like the right to a jury and the right to a lawyer. You've got a right to have a prosecutor that doesn't lie to the court, that doesn't go to these extreme lengths to perpetrate a fraud on the court just to get somebody, okay? That's not how the system works. That's not what it was designed to do. And if we don't have that, we don't have fairness. And if we don't have fundamental fairness, the constitutional requirements have not been met. The case should be dismissed.
I want to tell you about the Association of Mature American Citizens, or AMAC, an organization dedicated to America's seniors. AMAC stands out today, but not only advocating for senior issues, but also by pushing for conservative values that affect us all. If you join, you're not just supporting America's senior citizens, you can become part of a movement defending our freedoms and securing our nation's future. Plus, membership brings you exclusive benefits like discounts on travel, dining, entertainment, and special insurance rates. Regardless of your age, if you're driven to preserve freedom, AMAC welcomes you. Sign up now at amac.us/Megyn. And for a limited time, get a free gift membership for someone who shares your love of our great nation. Don't miss out on the chance to make a difference with AMAC. Join today at amac.us/Megyn and extend the invitation to a friend or family member free. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.